Hey folks, welcome back one more time to Pastor Paul's Midweek Bible Festival. We are still in the book of Job. We have spent 2 weeks looking at Job, and today is our third week, and next week we will wrap it up. So this week, before I get into this week, let's talk a little bit about where we've been and what we've talked about. In the first week, we introduced the book to you, okay? Talked about where the book of Job fits within the Old Testament, how it doesn't really tell the story of Israel. It's not history, it's not prophecy. It's part of what's called the writings, okay? Just sort of a little group of books that sometimes called the wisdom literature. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job are the wisdom books, plus a little bit of the book of Psalms. Okay. But we talked about the big picture, which I want to remind you of, which is that the big assumption, one of the underlying beliefs in the whole Old Testament, is that if you do good things will come to you. And this occurs on two different levels. Do good, good things will come to you. If A, then A. Shows up in two ways. The first way is in books like Proverbs, a book of wisdom, which basically says if you fear God, be moderate, be compassionate, give to the poor, good things will come to you. Personally. If A, then A on the individual personal level. The book of Proverbs is like the old sage sitting down with the young man about to go out into the world to make his fortune, explaining to the young man how the world works. Do good things, and good things will come to you. Do bad things, be wicked, be stupid, disaster will come. Do good things, be righteous, be compassionate, be moderate, good things will come to you. If A, then A, on the personal level. That's the first way that shows up in the Old Testament. The second way is a bigger national historical scale. The prophets, over and over again, warn Israel, start messing around with foreigners, worshiping foreign gods. God's going to punish you for that. The axe is going to fall if you disobey God, if you forsake the covenant. Right? You do that, Israel will fall. They did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and bad things happen. Whenever you hear that phrase, they did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, you know something bad's coming. If A, then A. You do good, you get good. You do what's evil in the sight of the Lord, you should be expecting disaster. So, if A, then A occurs on both the individual and the national levels. And it provides the backbone for so much of the Old Testament and the story of ancient Israel. Well, Job, as you know, challenges that assumption. That's kind of how it operates. It's the minority opinion. It's the minority report. Okay? It's the alternate wisdom. We talked a little bit about the book itself, how there's really no context. There's no historical context. Nobody in it is really an Israelite. They're all from different nations. The geographic setting is never indicated. It's just somewhere far off in some land named Uz or Uz, depending on how you like to say it. And the point of all that, of that lack of context, is to bring home the point, the story, and the questions. The questions being, is God just? That's number one. Is God just? The second question is like the first one. Does God operate the universe according to the strict principle of justice? Is God just is the first question. The second question is, does God operate the universe according to the strict principle of justice? And the third question is, if so, if God is just and operates the cosmos in accordance with justice, why does Job suffer? And by extension, why do innocent people suffer? It's about the arbitrariness of suffering, how it seems to fall to everybody, the good and the evil. So, those are the big questions addressed by the book, and we will keep our eyes on those questions today. They are going to be fundamental. The structure of the book, really 3 parts. First part is all prose. The prologue sets up situation, describes Job, and talks about this conversation between God and this fellow named Hasatan, the accuser, in the heavenly court. And how God allows Hasatan to have his way with Job and to bring down suffering upon Job, even though Job is innocent, upright. What was the phrase we used? Blameless and upright. Fears God, turns away from evil. That's who Job is. A thoroughly good guy. Fears God. So Hasatan has his way. And that all occurs in the prologue, right? Job's wealth is taken away. His health is taken away. His children are taken away. And as we'll see, his social status is also taken away. All of it. And Job's not at fault. Okay? That's the prologue. We ended the prologue, we talked about the prologue last week. Went through it step by step. And when the prologue ended, we found Job on the ash heap, nursing his sores. He was broken out from head to toe with these horrible sores all over his body. Hasatan saw to that. And Job's 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, have all shown up and sat with Job for a week in silence. Job has retained his cool. Whoever coined the phrase, the patience of Job, read the prologue only. Because Job was pretty cool-headed, philosophical throughout the first 2 chapters. Today we're going to look at chapters 3 to 37. That's a lot of chapters. And this is the poetic section. This is part of the big middle section. And there's a final section that's also prose. So we have prose at the beginning, a small slice of prose, a big chunk of poetry in the middle, many chapters worth, and then 1 chapter of prose again at the end. Today we're going to look at the largest section of the poetry. Chapters 3 to 37, which consist of a dialogue between Job and these friends who have showed up, who as of the end of the prologue, haven't opened their mouths yet. Nobody has. They've sat in silence for a week. So today, Job opens his mouth. And then for 34 chapters, he and his friends have a dialogue. Actually, dialogue is a very soft word for it. It's an argument is what it really is. It gets heated. It gets hot. It gets hard. But chapter 3 opens with Job no longer cool, calm, and philosophical. Job opened his mouth and curses the day of his birth. Let that day be darkness. The day of my birth. Let it be darkness. And Job sounds off. He's a man in grief. He's grieving His losses are enormous. And he grieves. He doesn't know why he suffered. He's completely at a loss as to why he suffered. He knows the truth, which is that he is innocent. He knows he is innocent, and that the suffering is not a divine punishment. And that makes him angry, because Job has been brought up on the traditional wisdom. If A, then A. He's been brought up on that. That is what made him who he is. The reason why he's got so many children and so many cattle and so much wealth is because he has reaped the rewards of his righteousness. If A, if he's good, then A. He gets wealth and happiness. It's a direct consequence. So he has been made by the traditional wisdom, but now the traditional wisdom that made him and also made his friends, as we'll see, has failed. And he's angry about it. He's really angry about it. He opens his mouth and curses the day of his birth. Lament, that is the content of Job 3. He's angry, he's brokenhearted, he's grieving. He wants to know why. Well, his three friends are sitting there listening to him. And Job sounds off for a chapter or two. And it makes his friends uncomfortable. Because they, like Job, have been made by the traditional wisdom. If A, then A. So what they think is that Job has made a mistake. It goes like this. Job claims, I'm innocent. Okay? Which is true. And we know it's true. His friends don't know it's true, but we do as the readers. I'm innocent. Therefore, the suffering is not a divine punishment. So his conclusion, Job's conclusion, in all these chapters of discussion and argument is this. I'm innocent, which he is. Suffering, his suffering is not a divine punishment because he has nothing to be punished for. Therefore, either God is unjust, or not quite so bad, slightly better, God does not operate the universe on the principle of justice. One of those two is true, because Job knows he is innocent. And so the traditional wisdom, if A, then A, is not working out for him because what he's gotten is if A, then negative A. If you're super good, you're going to get super bad. If you're righteous, if you're super righteous, you're going to especially get it from Hasatan. You will suffer if you are good. If A, then negative A. So again, Job says, I'm innocent. This is not divine punishment. Therefore, either God is unjust. That's the answer to our first question. Either God is unjust or God does not operate the universe in accordance to justice. So the answer to one of our first two questions has got to be no, concludes Job. What's up with God? Okay. And I need to say this before I get on to his friend's argument. This is Job's argument. I'm innocent. My suffering is not a divine punishment. Therefore, God is either unjust or operates the universe not according to the strict principle of justice. And I need to say this. We learn throughout these 37 chapters something very interesting about Job that we didn't learn at the beginning in the prose part. We discover through his descriptions of his life that he is a judge. That's what Job is. That's who Job is. That's what he did. That's what he was known for. And he was beloved because he was such a good judge. He was like, the Chief Justice in the Supreme Court of his land. And it's really important to understand that Job is a judge because he understands justice. And that's what he wants. And he knows justice well enough. He understands justice well enough to be certain that he's not getting any justice, that something is wrong. So he knows he's innocent. He knows his suffering is not a punishment. Therefore, he knows that God is either unjust, or at least God does not operate the universe according to justice. That something is wrong with his basic assumption about the world. If A, then A. Something's wrong. He puts the judgment on God. He says, God, what are you doing? This whole thing makes him question God. And he accuses God, as we'll see in a few minutes. Actually, let's go and look down at this. He does accuse God. God destroys the blameless. God destroys the blameless, Job says, and the wicked, everybody. God destroys the blameless and the wicked. He mocks the despair of the innocent, Job says about God. Chapter 9. God mocks the despair of the innocent. And sometimes he describes God as a bully. God attacks me, tears me up in anger. Attacks me like a bully attacks me. Tears me up in anger, gnashes his teeth at me, he says in chapter 16. Why has God denied me justice and made my life bitter? In other words, what I want you to hear, friends, is that Job is pointing his finger at God. He doesn't ever blaspheme God, but he gets right up to that cliff. He's got some hot words for God. Because in his logic, he's innocent. His suffering is not divine punishment. So either God is unjust or God has not decided to operate the universe according to justice. He points at God and accuses God of being a bully, of denying justice, and of destroying the blameless and mocking the despair of the innocent. That's what is going on in Job's mind. That's his logic. Now, his friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, they don't like what Job is saying. They feel like Job is getting too hot and heavy at God and that Job is somehow missing the point. Job is wrong. And herein lies the essence of their disagreement. The friends insist that God is just and that God operates the universe according to the principle of justice. They defend God. And they point their finger not at God, but at Job. Job is wrong. Job has committed some kind of sin. How do they know that? Because they still believe that if A, then A. So they believe if Job's getting bad, he must have done bad. You do bad, you get bad. So they're imploring Job, saying, Job, examine your conscience. Dig deep. Admit it. You have screwed up, and you're getting some divine schooling here. Please, just take the lesson. That is what they say to Job. They blame Job. They say Job is wrong. In fact, they even start making up lists of sins that Job must have committed. And boy, Job doesn't like that. What a bunch of lousy helpers you are. Long-winded gas bags. He calls them all kinds of names because they won't believe Job. They're leaning on the formula that they were taught growing up, and that has made them who they are too, because they're kind of hot shots in town also. And they've done good, and they've gotten good, so they have a vested interest in the traditional wisdom. So they defend it. They defend God. Their idea of God. They're not defending God. This is an interesting point to make. They're not defending God. They're defending their conception of God. God does not need defending, but their conception of God needs defending. So they do that. Now, it's funny how this plays out. Job says something, and then his first friend Eliphaz says something. And then Job says something, and then the second friend Bildad says something, and then Job says something, and then the third friend Zophar says something. There's a pattern. Job, Eliphaz, Job, Bildad, Job, Zophar. That's a cycle, and that cycle repeats 3 times. Okay, between chapters 3 and 28. Job, Eliphaz, Job, Bildad, Job, Zophar. And then over again, and then over again. 3 times around that cycle through chapters 3 through 28. And the argument is basically about who God is and why this is happening with Job. Job says he's innocent, that God is doing something weird here, that God is unjust, or God does not operate the universe according to justice. His friends say, no, God is just. It's you, Job, that's creating this problem. And in chapters 29 through 31, Job has had it with his friends. He is done. Stick a fork in them, because he is finished. He's done talking to people. He's done talking to these 3 friends who do nothing but spout the conventional garden variety, standard issue wisdom. And he starts to call on God to show up. God, show yourself. Show me justice the same way I showed my people justice when I was a judge back in the good old days, when I got some respect and some love from people. Show me some justice. I'm not getting any. God, where are you? Chapters 29 through 31, 3 chapters. Job calls out to God to please show up. And then somebody shows up, but it's not God. There's this 4th friend who seems to have come out of virtually nowhere, just comes out of the ether. Elihu, the Buzite, okay, another non-Israelite. He's got a Hebrew name, Elihu, but he's not an Israelite. He's a Buzite, okay, and he's younger, and he's had it with all these old guys. He says, none of you is right. He said, but it's a little more of a nuance on the thing. Still says that Job is wrong to talk the way he does about God. And that way he agrees with the 3 other friends. Elihu says, Job, you really shouldn't be talking that way about God. Be careful. So in that way, he agrees with the 3 friends, but he disagrees with the 3 friends because he doesn't come to the same conclusion they do. This is just a little bit of an odd character thrown in here. What he says is that maybe all this suffering of Job's is a warning to avoid sin. It's not because of maybe a sin that Job has already committed, but maybe a warning to not commit future sins. Or maybe, it's to build character. Maybe all this suffering is just to build character in Job. Okay? Job didn't have that either. Now, this Elihu character seems to have been maybe added by some other author at some point, because it really does break up the whole pattern of the book. Elihu really does break up the whole pattern of the book. Job is just called for God to show up, and then Elihu shows up. Later on, God does show up. That's for next week. Okay. But the point here is that Job is corrected by a fourth friend who's got a little bit different twist on the whole thing. No, Job, maybe you are innocent. Maybe. Okay. But that's because God is trying to school you in something to prevent future sins or to build character. But again, Job not having it. Job wants God to show up. So the wisdom of the ages is spent. Over these chapters, standard, traditional, conventional wisdom has been exhausted by the three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, and also by this fourth guy, Elihu, who shows up and throws in his own little twist on the situation. But all of the friends, all four, Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and Elihu, all think that Job should dial it down. Job doesn't want to. Job's had it. Job wants God to show up and to explain himself. Why am I not getting the justice that I require? If I am good enough to show justice to my people, God, why aren't you good enough to show justice to me? That's the question. And in chapter 38, God shows up, makes a personal appearance for our hero, Job. And that's where we'll pick up next week, in week number 4 of the book of Job. See you then. Love you all. Bye now.